Candace Owens. Candace Owens went on Tucker Carlson's show, and she made quite a claim about what constitutes modern-day slavery. Take a look.
Look at these inner cities and you go, why do they want these problems? Why are they funding these problems? Why do they want drug addicts? Who on earth would ever fund a center to allow people to do drugs? Well, you're looking at a government that wants a system of dependence. To me, I look at the situation and I say, what we're seeing is a modernized system of slavery. This is slavery in 2022, and they are proliferating this under the guise of COVID-19.
I agree with you. I agree with every word of that. I wish I didn't, but I sincerely do. I wonder why there isn't at least one city in America that says, I don't care what the court, I don't care what anybody says. You can't crap on my sidewalk. Get the hell out of here, buddy. Move on. Like, that is, I think, the way that all civilizations have always reacted to threats like this, like drug addiction and vagrancy. Why does nobody do that now?
Nobody does that now because there's been such federal overreach. And I will say, in America, the one guard that we have against this is state rights. Thank God for governors that are standing up and saying absolutely not, no matter how hard the Biden administration tries to overreach and say, we are absolutely going to have this. We need to fund more money, more money. The government is creating problems because they want you to turn to the government for answers. And I always say Black America was the experiment with this.
So aiding homeless people is modernized slavery. So it's not the homelessness that's modernized slavery. It's not, say, wage slavery that's modernized slavery, so working a full-time job and not making enough money to survive. No, it's aiding homeless people that is modernized slavery. The way that the right talks about homelessness is astounding. You know, their main answer is like criminalization. You know, make it illegal, lock them up, throw away the key, or like Tucker said there, hey, buddy, you can't crap on my sidewalk, move on. Okay, well, where's that person going to move on to? They're going to move on to another place where they might end up crapping on the sidewalk. So how do you actually address this? Well, we know. It's not some mystery. Finland has nearly eradicated homelessness. How do they do it? A housing first policy. The way it usually works in most countries is there's all these hoops you have to jump through in order to, get through the system, have a roof over your head, and there's just too many hoops to jump through. In Finland, they did a housing first policy. Look, we're just going to put a roof over your head. Well, they nearly eradicated homelessness. Wow, what a shocker. Turns out homeless people are missing homes. And if you give them homes, then they're much better off. Now, I get it. This is where people turn around and say, well, hold on now. Because there are people who work to put a roof over their head. And so if they're working to put a roof over their head, aren't you incentivizing people to just not work and still have a roof over their head? Well, the answer to that, based on the data we have, is that doesn't appear to be what happens. It's not like people who work full time then turn around and say, well, since the homeless person has a roof over their head, I'm going to now be homeless too, or now not have a job too, or stop doing the things that I like doing too. No, that actually doesn't happen. But that's why either way, you give them a reasonable accommodation. So it's not about like, hey, the homeless person needs to have a pool in the backyard and a yacht and 2,000 square feet. No, just a roof over their head. Look, Utah, I think, did a great job nearly eliminating homelessness as well. They're a very conservative state. But if you actually are dedicated to it, you can do it. You know those, they're almost like mini houses? I just read an article the other day. I forget where it was happening, but somebody took the initiative to build a bunch of these things and just give them to homeless people. That works, man. That works. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not all you have to do. So you should do housing first and then also have other things to help them, like, for example, mental illness treatment. I mean, this should be any Medicare for all system, universal healthcare system, should also have universal mental health as part of that. And, help with that. Assistance with drug addiction is another thing that would be very useful. Just having a society that generally cares and gives people various safety nets to fall back on when times are rough, that would ameliorate the problem. And like I said, we have all the evidence in the world that this is the path you go down. Housing first, aid with the mental illness, aid with drug addiction and things of that nature. But beyond that, there's been a number of studies now that show if you give homeless people a roof over their head, you know what happens? it saves the taxpayers money too. So if your concern is like fiscal responsibility, well, guess what? This is a lucky and rare issue where you can align with actual moral leftist ideas. So it is both the fiscally conservative thing to do and the morally correct thing to do to put a roof over homeless people's heads, because according to one study, it saved taxpayers 49.5%. 49.5%. A chronically homeless person cost taxpayers an average of $35,578 per year. And then you basically cut that in half if you put a roof over their head. So it's like 17 and change if you put a roof over their head, because you have all these other problems and ways in which homeless people have run-ins with the system if they're actually without a home, without a roof over their head, without safety and security. Whether it's, run-ins with police officers and then the cost of having them in jail or whatever the case is. There's the medical system. How much more often are you going to be in the medical system and have to use that if you're out on the street? So the answers are actually relatively obvious, but they're not talking about this in a reasonable humanitarian way. They're talking about it at, like we have parasites or vermin that need to be eliminated. And that's always the problem with how the right talks about homelessness. Apparently, it's modernized slavery to help the homeless is what they're describing there. It's part of conservatism that never appealed to me, that always made me sort of cringe, is this weird insistence that, like, well, actually, the people who are worse off in society are somehow getting one over on you, my loyal right-wing viewer. And that drives me crazy. And what people need to realize is if you're in the middle class, you have a lot more in common with a homeless person than you do with a billionaire. You do. You have a lot more in common with a homeless person than you do with some CEO of a giant multinational. You do. And class solidarity is important, and what's good for the homeless people, the social safety net programs that are there, are good for the working class as well. It's even good for like the upper middle class. It's good for everybody. So there you have it. Helping homeless people is modernized slavery, according to some of the dumbest right-wing charlatans in the country. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.